When you would expect support from the people closest, we got the opposite.
For this list,
Being thrown to the wolves, I was being fed to the wolves.
The letter arrived quietly. No press release, no statement to the media, no carefully worded announcement released through official palace communications. Just a private message, conveyed through the most discreet of channels, and what it contained reportedly left senior palace aides in a state of complete and utter disbelief. Because according to multiple sources who are described as having direct knowledge of events at the highest levels of the royal household, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, had made one final request to Prince William, the Prince of Wales, a request that, by all accounts, she had deliberated over carefully, a request that sources describe as deeply personal, and Prince William's answer was swift. It was unequivocal, and those who were made aware of it say it carried with it a weight of permanence that no one who received it could mistake. The palace, it is now said, has confirmed what many insiders had long feared was inevitable. There is no way back, not now, not in any form that anyone currently in that institution is willing to discuss or entertain. So what exactly did Meghan ask for? What drove her to make this final reach across what has become one of the most fractured divides in modern royal history? And why has Prince William reportedly responded with a finality so absolute that even those closest to both sides of this story say, "This time is genuinely different. Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal changes the entire landscape of this story." As many of you may know, the relationship between Prince William, the Prince of Wales, and Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, has been one of the most scrutinized, most discussed, and, for those who care deeply about this family, most heartbreaking stories to emerge from the British monarchy in living memory. Cast your mind back to May of 2018, to the extraordinary scenes at Windsor Castle, where the entire world watched as Prince Harry married Meghan Markle in a ceremony that felt, at the time, like a genuine new chapter for the royal family, a modernizing moment, an opening, a suggestion that this ancient institution was capable of evolving, of welcoming someone whose background, biracial, American, divorced, an actress, broke every single convention the palace had ever enforced. And in those early months, sources suggest, there was genuine warmth, genuine effort made on all sides to build something that could work. Palace insiders who were present during that period describe a family that was trying, imperfectly, awkwardly at times, but genuinely trying, to bring Meghan into the fold. William and Kate, according to those who observed them closely, made efforts. Invitations were extended, conversations were had. There was, reportedly, a real desire to make it work. And then, it all collapsed. In January of 2020, in a move that stunned the world, Harry and Meghan announced that they were stepping back from their roles as senior members of the royal family. They were leaving. They were going to pursue financial independence. They were relocating to North America. The institution was, by all accounts, blindsided. King Charles, then still the Prince of Wales, was reportedly devastated, and William, sources say, felt something closer to betrayal. Because what followed was not merely a geographic separation, it was a complete dismantling of the relationship between two brothers who had, for their entire lives, been each other's most consistent companions in the strange, cloistered, relentlessly public world they were born into. The Oprah interview of March 2021, the Netflix documentary, Harry's memoir, Spare, published in January 2023. Each one added new layers of pain, new allegations, new details that those inside the palace found not just hurtful, but, in some cases, entirely irreconcilable with any future path back. Prince William, meanwhile, has steadily grown into the role that history has always intended for him, the Prince of Wales, the future king, a man who, by all accounts, has become increasingly clear-eyed about the responsibilities of that position, and increasingly unwilling to allow anything to compromise the dignity and stability of the institution he will one day lead. Sources close to William describe a man who has processed the grief of his fractured family relationship and arrived, deliberately and consciously, at a place of absolute resolve. And Meghan has not been idle. She has built, she has pivoted, she has launched ventures, cultivated new audiences, and established herself as a public figure independent of the royal title that once defined her global recognition. But according to palace watchers who have monitored this situation with extraordinary care, there has been, running beneath all of that visible activity, a quieter, less public desire. A hope, perhaps, that the door which closed in 2020 was not locked forever. It is that hope that has now, reportedly, been extinguished for months, and sources suggest this began considerably earlier than most people are aware. Quiet, indirect communications had reportedly been taking place between people connected to the Sussex household and people connected to the senior working royal family, not official communications, not formal exchanges with palace letterheads and documented records, but tentative, exploratory back-channel contacts of the kind that have always characterized sensitive diplomatic negotiations, because that, in essence, is what this had become, a negotiation between two sides of a family that had, to all outward appearances, stopped talking to one another. According to sources who are described as familiar with the general contours of these communications, Meghan reportedly reached out through trusted intermediaries, individuals who had maintained relationships with both camps and who were considered capable of carrying sensitive messages without the risk of those messages becoming public. And what Meghan communicated, sources say, was a desire to address what she reportedly characterized as unresolved matters, matters that she felt, if addressed directly and honestly, could open a path towards something better than the current state of silence and estrangement. Sources suggest that at the heart of Meghan's request were several deeply personal issues: the standing and recognition of her children, Archie and Lilibet, within the royal family, a matter that has reportedly caused significant and ongoing pain. The question of whether any formal acknowledgement of the Sussex family's place within the broader royal framework might ever be extended, and, perhaps most ambitiously, the possibility of some form of carefully managed public rapprochement, a gesture, a meeting, something that might signal to the world that the worst of the rift was behind them. Now, you might be wondering, and it is a fair question to ask, whether any of this was realistic, whether the gap between what Meghan was reportedly hoping for and what the palace was ever likely to offer had already grown too wide to bridge. And the answer, according to those who were aware of the situation as it developed, is that there were some, a small number, who believed, cautiously, that some form of limited progress might be possible. Not a full reconciliation, not a return, but perhaps a lowering of the temperature, a quieting of the hostility. But William, reportedly, was not among them, and those who know him well say that this should not have surprised anyone who has watched his evolution over the past several years, because Prince William has become, by all credible accounts, a man who draws lines, who defines boundaries with absolute clarity, who, when he reaches a decision after careful deliberation, does not revisit it out of sentiment or social pressure, or the distant possibility that time might soften what cannot be softened. Palace watchers have noted, with considerable significance, that the timing of this development must be understood in the context of everything else currently happening within the royal institution. King Charles has been navigating a period of personal and medical challenge that has placed enormous demands on the working members of the family. William and Catherine have absorbed additional public duties. The pressure on the institution to project unity, competence, and stability has never been greater. And in that environment, sources say, any move that threatened to reopen the Sussex wound publicly was viewed not merely as unwelcome, but as genuinely dangerous to the Crown's carefully maintained image. And so, according to sources, when William's response was formulated and conveyed back through those same quiet channels, it carried with it not just his personal position, but the weight of the institution behind it. This was not, reportedly, one man's emotional reaction to a painful family history. This was a considered, deliberate, institutionally endorsed position, a signal sent at the highest possible level, and its message left absolutely no room for misinterpretation, which forces us to confront a question that is genuinely difficult to sit with, because the question is not simply about Meghan, or about William, or even about Harry. The question is about what happens to human relationships when they become entangled, irreversibly, with the weight of institutions, legacies, and crowns. Can a door, once closed by a future king, ever truly be reopened, or does the moment it shuts become history? And then, something shifted. Not gradually, not in the way that most changes within this institution unfold, slowly, quietly, managed and contained, until the moment arrives when an announcement is ready, and the wording has been approved, and every possible consequence has been war-gamed by the advisors, whose entire professional purpose is to prevent surprises. This shift, reportedly, happened with unusual speed. According to a source described by those who have relayed this account only as someone with direct and verified knowledge of communications at the highest level of the royal household. Not a peripheral figure, not someone speculating from the outside, but someone genuinely close to these events. The palace's position on the Sussex situation was formalized in a manner that went beyond anything that had previously been documented or acknowledged in any form. This was not a silence, of the kind the palace has deployed before when it has simply chosen not to respond to Sussex-related stories. This was not an avoidance. This was not the careful, calculated non-answer that royal communications teams have perfected over decades of managing impossible situations. This was, reportedly, a confirmation. The decision, this individual reportedly conveyed to those close to the situation, was made clearly and without ambiguity. Prince William's view is that the circumstances that led to this point, the statements made, the interviews given, the deeply personal allegations that were placed into the public record, cannot be undone. They cannot be walked back. They cannot be reframed or recontextualized in any way that changes their fundamental nature. And the institution's view, this source added, aligns fully with his. Read those words again. Let them settle. Without ambiguity. The institution's view aligns fully with his. For anyone who has followed this story with the attention it deserves, those phrases are not merely significant. They are, arguably, the most definitive language that has ever been applied to this situation, because they signal something that, until now, was never quite stated so plainly by anyone in a position to know. This is no longer a family dispute that the palace is patiently managing in the hope that time will bring resolution. This is institutional policy. Meghan's request, described by sources as the most direct and sincere overture she had made since the original departure in 2020, has been declined. Not with cruelty, sources note. Not with the kind of public humiliation that a different institution might have chosen, but with a quietness that, in some ways, communicates the decision's permanence more powerfully than any public statement ever could. The palace's message, conveyed through those quietest of channels, is said to be this. And these words matter. The chapter involving any pathway for the Sussexes back into the framework of the working royal family is not under review. It is not pending further discussion. It is not waiting for the right moment or the right circumstances. It is closed. And yet there is something about that word, closed, that demands we sit with it for a moment longer, because doors that are closed are not the same as doors that have ceased to exist. History has shown us, time and again, that within royal families, even the most final-sounding declarations have sometimes, proven less permanent than they appeared. So the question that hangs over this entire story, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable right now, is this. Is this the end of Meghan's story within the orbit of the British royal family? Or is it simply the end of this chapter? And this is the moment where you, watching this right now, wherever you are, whatever your own feelings about this family and this story might be, may find yourself genuinely divided. Because there are at least 3 distinct ways this situation could develop from here. And each of them is worth examining carefully, because each one says something important, not just about Meghan and William, but about what the British monarchy is capable of. Theory 1. The complete American pivot. If what sources are describing is accurate, that William's rejection was not merely personal, but institutionally endorsed, and therefore essentially permanent, then the most logical path available to Meghan leads entirely away from the British royal world and deeper into American public life. We are already seeing elements of this. The business ventures, the lifestyle branding, the careful cultivation of a humanitarian and philanthropic profile that does not depend on a royal title for its credibility. Some royal observers believe this outcome was always coming, that the request, however sincere, was, at some level, a final test of whether any door remained open. And now that the answer has been received, Meghan is free, in a way she perhaps was not before, to build a life and a legacy that is entirely and deliberately her own. Some even suggest this could ultimately prove to be her most powerful chapter, the one where she steps out of the royal shadow completely and writes her own story without it. Theory 2. The Harry variable. This theory is perhaps the most emotionally complex of the three, because it asks a question that, if sources are correct, may not have a comfortable answer. If William has closed the door specifically on Meghan, on her return, her reintegration, her rehabilitation within the royal framework, has he closed it equally on his brother? Some observers believe, and palace insiders have reportedly neither confirmed nor denied this framing, that William's feelings toward Harry, however damaged, however tested by the events of the past 5 years, remain fundamentally different from his position regarding Meghan, that the bond of brotherhood, forged through shared childhood loss and shared royal experience, has not entirely dissolved, even if it is currently buried beneath layers of hurt that neither man has yet found a way to excavate. If that is true, then the most significant unanswered question in this entire story is not what Meghan does next. It is what Harry does, because Harry's choice, the choice he makes about his marriage, his loyalty, his identity, his future, could determine whether any version of reconciliation with William ever becomes possible. And that is a weight that no one, from the outside, can fully measure. Theory 3. Time changes everything. And then there is the view held by a quieter, less dramatic set of royal observers, people who have studied this institution across decades and who are deeply skeptical of permanent-sounding declarations. Their argument is simple, and it is rooted in history. Royal families have fractured before, deeply, painfully, seemingly irrevocably, and yet time, the particular quality of time that moves differently within institutions that think in centuries rather than news cycles, has a way of creating possibilities that the heat of the moment makes invisible. Perhaps, years from now, when the children are older and the original wounds have scarred over and the world has moved on to different stories, some quieter version of connection becomes possible. Not a return, not a rehabilitation, but something human, something that forgoes the institutional battle entirely and finds, in the space between two brothers who once stood together at their mother's funeral, something worth preserving. What do you think? Is this truly the final chapter of Meghan's relationship with the British royal family, or do you believe that somewhere, somehow, a different ending is still being written? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And in a story this layered, your perspective genuinely matters. What we are left with, after everything that sources have described, after every account we have examined, is a picture that is both simple and devastating in equal measure. A request was made, the most sincere and direct request, reportedly, that Meghan had made since this family's fracture began. It was conveyed carefully. It was received at the highest level. And the answer that came back, quiet, measured, and by all accounts absolute, was one that those who heard it say left no room for hope of a different outcome. The door is not ajar. It is not being reconsidered behind closed palace corridors. According to those with knowledge of this situation, the palace has spoken, and Prince William, the future King of England, has aligned himself entirely with that position. Whether history ultimately remembers this moment as the true and final end of the Sussex chapter, or merely as one more painful turn in a story that continues to surprise us, is something that only time will be able to answer. And what we discovered in the hours that followed this confirmation, a detail that those inside the palace have gone to considerable lengths to contain, is something we will be exploring in our very next video. What it reveals about the full picture of this situation is, frankly, more extraordinary than anything we have shared with you today. Make sure you are subscribed And make sure notifications are on, because you will not want to be the last to know. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, or think something, or question something you thought you already understood, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who follows this story, and subscribe, because we will be back very soon with what comes next. Because ultimately, the question this story forces all of us to sit with goes far deeper than any single family's private pain. It asks something ancient and genuinely difficult about power, and loyalty, and the price that institutions, and the people within them, are asked to pay in order to endure. Can a monarchy built on permanence ever make peace with those who chose to leave it? Or is the act of leaving, itself, the answer?